Welcome to Cakes and Cake Decorating. In the next few slides, I'm going to introduce you to the concept of cakes, which will prepare you for cake decorating, which comes later in this unit. Before we start doing anything with cakes, you need to have a good understanding of what a cake is. And you probably do already have some prior knowledge on what a cake is, but just in case, the word cake is used to describe everything from one or more layers. A cake could be one layer or it could be 6 layers. It could be filled with jams, puddings, chocolate, custards, or it could just be left unfilled. It could be frosted, it could be adorned, which means decorated, or it could simply just be left plain. These cakes are special and often associated with life's milestones, like birthdays, weddings, showers, engagements, anything that we can celebrate. Or you can simply just have your cake to eat as a dessert or as a snack, like what we're going to be doing in class. Now, when we talk about cakes, there are 2 groups of cakes. There are shortened cakes and then there are unshortened cakes. Shortened cakes is what you're probably most familiar with and what you've had before. Examples include butter cakes, which are your like birthday or wedding cakes. They are usually a yellow, white, or chocolate cake. That's a butter cake. Or a pound cake, okay? Now, some characteristics of shortened cakes are they're tender, moist, and velvety. And the reason why they're tender and moist is because they contain fat. That's a huge characteristic of shortened cakes is they contain fat. They usually contain butter, margarine, or shortening. Sometimes a combination of the two of butter and margarine or butter and shortening, depending on the recipe. Shortened cakes have a leavening agent, which makes the cake rise, and it's usually baking powder or baking soda, and it usually is accompanied by sour milk, which causes the chemical reaction. Sour milk is your buttermilk. The next group of cakes is your unshortened cakes. This is also called foam cakes, and the characteristic is they're very light and fluffy. Another characteristic is they contain little to no fat. There are 3 categories of foam cakes. The first one contains absolutely no fat, and an example would be an angel food cake. We're going to be making a chocolate angel food cake in class. Then the next category is those that contain only fat from egg yolks, and an example would be a sponge cake. We will be making a sponge cake, and you'll see that the texture is truly like a sponge. And the third category of a foam cake is your exception. And the reason why it's an exception is because it does contain fat. Usually it's going to contain a little bit of melted butter or some type of oil plus egg yolks. An example would be a chiffon cake, and we're going to be making an orange glow chiffon cake. All of these unshortened cakes are leavened by air, which is the egg white is beaten to white stiff peaks, and then through the cooking process it keeps its volume and texture of the cake. Some cake ingredients that we want you to be familiar with, which should also be a review from your quick bread and yeast bread recipes. They're very similar. There might be some twists and differences, that's it. Flour gives structure to a cake. You can use cake flour, which is going to make a more delicate and tender cake. And the reason why cake flour makes a more delicate cake is because there's less gluten compared to like all-purpose flour, and it's also more finely ground, so it's just going to yield a more light and fluffy texture. The ratio, if you didn't have cake flour or whatnot, is 1 cup of all-purpose equals 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of cake flour. So you can kind of adjust recipes. If you don't have cake flour, you can use all-purpose flour in its place. You just want to kind of modify the amount. Then you have sugar, which is just regular granulated sugar, which provides sweetness and tenderizes the gluten. Then your eggs, depending on the type of cake, if it's shortened or unshortened, you're going to be using eggs in different ways. So egg can provide flavor and color and also some structure. In unshortened cakes, eggs provide all the structure. Some recipes use eggs to incorporate the leavening agent like the unshortened cakes, like angel food or chiffon. If you use too many eggs or too much egg in a recipe, it could cause the egg to be very tough in texture. In cakes, liquids blend the ingredients together and often provide moisture. Sometimes you'll be adding a little bit of juice, milk, etc. It kind of varies depending on the recipe and the flavors that are trying to be achieved. And then you always have a little bit of salt, which helps provide flavor. It kind of balances out with the sugar. There's usually a fat ingredient if it's a shortened cake, which tenderizes the gluten in the flour and provides some flavor and richness to the cake. Then you have your leavening agents, which cause the cake to rise and become porous and light. Porous means tiny little holes within the cake that you're looking for, which creates the texture that you want in a cake. And then you have your flavorings. These are not essential, but add to the distinction of cakes. And some examples will include spices like cinnamon, extracts. Usually the most common is vanilla, but sometimes in cakes you'll add a strawberry extract, a lemon extract to give that cake the desired flavors. Sometimes you'll have some fruits and sometimes even some nuts. That is all I have on cakes. Please continue on with the cake decorating tutorial.